Today we embark on a months-long journey into the 6th chapter of the Gospel of John, where we are invited to dwell in the mystery of God's love for the world. This divine love is made known to us through the most basic and common element, bread. You're going to hear a lot about bread. In the miraculous feeding of the 5,000, we witness the human hungering for hope and courage to believe that there is more to this life that we share than scarcity, injustice, and despair. The fact that this is the only miracle that appears in all 4 Gospels says something about the power of this incredible story and the impact it has made on people's lives for over 2,000 years. We are also witnesses to the miracle of Jesus walking on water as the panicked disciples are being tossed to and fro in their tiny boat on an angry sea. Fact, fiction, or fairy tales? What are we to make of these miracles? Are we to believe that Jesus literally took 5 barley loaves and 2 dried fish this young boy offered him, and somehow blessed them and was able to feed all these hungry souls and had enough left over to fill 12 baskets full of what remained? How can we seriously take this seemingly preposterous idea that Jesus actually walked on water? In our post-Christendom world, a world, or at least when our country, for the first time in our country's history, more people claim to be spiritual than religious, we place our utmost confidence on reason, fact-checking, databases, and scientific empirical proof. So when anyone talks of miracles, especially those found in the Bible that we read about today, the cynics and the super-rationalists write these events off as some kind of magic trick, assuming it is all a bit silly, maybe a bit naive, or even childlike. In response, it is so tempting to try to explain away these miracles with logical, reasonable explanations as to what most likely occurred. Did the crowds see the boy offer to share his meager brown bag lunch of bread and fish, and in response they were inspired by his generosity to do the same, to take out their own brown bag lunches that they had packed away and shared with those sitting close by? Did Jesus really walk on water, or was he simply walking so close to the shoreline that from the view of the boat it looked like he was walking on water? Simple, rational explanations. End of story. However, that is not the end of the story. In fact, it is only the beginning. And I think that's the point. The thousands of men and women and children that were fed that day did not simply go home full and satisfied and get on with their lives. Instead, they continue to follow Jesus because of what they experienced on that grassy knoll. It's much more than an impromptu picnic in the park. In some mysterious way that is beyond any rational explanation, Jesus gives these peasants who struggle daily under the heavy-handed rule of the Roman occupying forces, he gives them the hope to believe that life can be better, that somehow love and justice ultimately prevails. They have had literally a taste of what it is like to be a part of God's kingdom, and they want more. Jesus sees their physical hunger, and out of compassion, he feeds them. He shows them that they truly matter. Their lives matter to God. He reveals God's love for them by feeding their empty bellies as well as their hungry souls. God's love becomes incarnate, tangible and visible in Jesus' humble offering of bread and fish. The sight of Jesus walking on water is not nearly miraculous as this grace-filled, comforting presence that he has in the very midst of a raging storm. Jesus comes to them through the turbulent waters to reassure and calm their fear and anxiety. It is I. Do not be afraid. In time, this transforming experience will enable these same disciples to have the courage to venture out and walk on the rough seas of their own lives and be a calming reassurance, non-anxious presence to all those they encounter. These are the true miracles that our modern eyes often fail to see. The mystery of wonder of how God uses the most ordinary things and events in our lives to do the most extraordinary things. We witness lives being transformed by Jesus' love and compassion, his compassionate presence, feeding those who are hungry, reassuring those who are frightened and anxious. Scarcity has been replaced by a sense of overwhelming abundance. Despair and fear has been transformed into the courage to hope and daring to believe that the power of love, even with all our doubts and certainties, will prevail. This is what Paul is speaking to in his letter to the Ephesians. By the power of God at work within us, God is able to accomplish abundantly far more than we can ever ask or imagine. I think we see this in that first reading from the Hebrew Bible. We see God at work in this turbulent life of King David. He has been corrupted by ambition, greed, and privilege in his role of king over all Israel. David sexually abuses Bathsheba and arranges the murder of her husband Uriah. And yet, and this is the mystery of it all, God redeems his broken and fragmented soul, revealing a most assuring and profound truth to all of us, that no matter how far we stray from the person God calls us to be, God helps us with God's presence, with love and compassion, to find our way back home into the very heart of God. One of the real challenges of today is whether we are able to put aside our 21st century demand to just give me the facts, please. Are we able to let go of our need for certainty, which I think, ironically, is the antithesis of faith? With certainty, we become brittle and we shut down to what may be. It leaves no room for wonder or curiosity. In these extremely polarized and anxious, intolerant times we live in now, we need more than ever to rediscover our capacity to wonder, to be curious. Do we really have to know the answer to everything? This is a burden, I think, we can easily lay down. And when we do, we are open to reclaim that innocent sense of wonder of how God is fully present in the world and in the most intimate places of our lives, feeding us and reassuring us. I see this wonder in the eyes of a tiny infant. With their bright eyes wide open, they are taking in the world for the very first time with such pure joy and delight in the most simple and basic things we often overlook and simply take for granted. Spending time with these sacred stories, these miracle stories, can help us rediscover and experience the true wonder of awe of God's presence in our world and in our lives, even this very moment. The English poet Elizabeth Barrett Browning captures this sense of wonder beautifully. She writes, "Earth's crammed with heaven, and every common bush afire with God, and only he who sees takes off his shoes. The rest sit around and pluck blackberries." I pray that you see the wonder of God's abundant presence in the world and in your lives this day and always. Amen.